Morning, good afternoon, or should I say good evening. Welcome to another edition of the e-commerce report. Steve, you had a golf day yesterday. I believe it was a very successful golf day. It made me think that what is the equivalent of this in the online business, in the e-commerce business? Is it a webinar or is it maybe a virtual golf day? I know that after doing some research, they say that actually online golf tournaments are all of that is actually becoming a very increasingly popular thing for these online businesses like your e-commerce owners. What would you think of that? I mean, that would be very interesting, a golf day online.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting concept, but I think there's nothing better than actually spending time with customers and getting to know them. And a golf course is a great way of being able to do that, as well as dinners and other events. We spend a lot of time over Zoom and over Google Meets and spending time virtually, but I think there's nothing better than actually spending that time in person with any of your customers and just getting to know them and understanding them more on a personal level, which is really useful. And so we have an annual golf day each year, and it's always good to connect with our customers at that time.
Yeah, being on the ground is where everything happens. But someone who's really on the ground is the South African. In South Africa, we sending parcels could be very complex because of the infrastructure, and impoverished areas do find it extremely difficult. To make it more affordable and easy accessible for communities in these areas, they started sending parcels on public transport. Now, it's taxis, and it's not your yellow cabs that we know, in New York City. These are transportation systems. It's a mini bus actually taking about 15 commuters when it's legally, so it could be way more than that. But there's a businessman, Zamokuhle Twala, and he actually saw a great business concept here, and he started using these public transport in a more formal way to send parcels from these impoverished areas. Now, earlier this week, I had a quick chat to him, an interview on Locate to You. So let's listen to this clip, what he had to say about his business.
So that's when, as Tumela, we came up with an idea to say, how about we could have like Tumela pickup points, where if you wanted to send a parcel to Zamo in Pietermaritzburg, say, lady, say from Cape Town, you don't need to give it directly to a taxi driver. You can go to a Tumela point, drop it there, and all these 10 parcels, you and your friends and other people, they get consolidated and they get given to one taxi driver. And the taxi driver goes to the destination point where there's another Tumela point. They drop it there. And then when you are dropping the parcel, you had to create like your security pin. You had to get the numbers. So as soon as they receive the parcel on the other end, that's when they get a notification to say your parcel is ready for collection. So you can see now between the recipient and the taxi driver, you reduce that friction now, because taxi driver goes to a Tumela point, picks up consolidated parcels, go drop them. They don't need to communicate with anyone along the transit process.
So, Steve, what are the advantages of this revolutionary last mile delivery that really suits a specific impoverished community instead of the traditional couriers? It's too expensive for them. What are the advantages here?
Yeah, look, I mean, I love hearing stories like this, because what you've been able to show is how technology can have some real life examples in being able to help, different consumers in this instance operate. Now, there's a real business actually being born here. And I think what you've been able to see is they've got these unused assets that they're, used right now to deliver people, but might have some additional capacity. It's going on that same route, and you can be able to fill that up with parcels, which is, really, really clever. And I think this is, can be used in many parts of the world where they've got trains and buses that are all, usually traveling with capacity, and they can be filled up with parcels. You see that today, obviously, with aircrafts. A lot of freight gets moved across the world with aircraft, and that's just, on passenger aircrafts or dedicated aircrafts. But there's often freight that's sitting on the back of passenger aircrafts. And I think it's just about using this unused capacity that's operating right throughout the world. And technology allows you to make it easier to use this unused capacity. He spoke there about having that PIN number being able to be sent to the recipient's giving that to the taxi driver to then have that parcel actually released. So that's showing security of that parcel actually being traveling through that period. So yeah, it's very, very clever, and I think technology allows us to enable the use of this unused capacity that's operating throughout the world.
There's obviously this unique trust relationship between the taxi drivers and passengers. Now, how does this trust factor actually contribute to the reliability of the parcel delivery?
Yeah, I mean, I think this comes back to when I think about the days of ride sharing, when that sort of all started and everyone sort of was getting into that first sort of ride sharing experience, and it feels a bit awkward. This is someone else's vehicle that you're jumping into. And now everyone just does that every day of the week. And I think that's just the same sort of thing. Most times things are all going to go to plan. And whether it's with a professional driver or whether it's with, in this instance, a taxi that's doing this delivery, most times it's going to be fine. And you may have some instances where you will have some instances where parcels get damaged or lost or maybe stolen. But that happens in the normal world as well. Most people are good people and do the right thing. And I think this is a good example of that.
Yeah. Do you see a potential for similar last mile delivery solutions to be adopted in other regions, like the Philippines or India, in these areas where there's far-flung areas?
Yeah, I think definitely. And I think we're seeing that in lots of areas across the world where there's unused this asset that's traveling that's got capacity, and how we can actually fill that up with additional capacity. We've seen that even in our Zoom to You business in Australia, where we were using buses for a period of time to move parcels between different capital cities. There were passengers on those buses, we were able to fill them up where they had capacity. And so, yeah, there's definitely ways of that being able to happen. Often you see that in the freight industry where you might even have a truck that's going between locations, but the truck is carrying freight from multiple different companies, and that's where they're just filling up that capacity as much as they possibly can. And that's a really good thing for the customer. It's good for the environment as well.
So if you want to see some of those photos of how the parcels are being transported in these taxis, go and head over to our Locate to You news site for those pictures. Now let's hop onto something else. I've never heard about reverse logistics. I mean, that is on the rise. It's a big business. It's at almost $500 billion marked in 2021, and it's actually projected to rise to nearly 700 billion in 2027. Now, please just tell us, Steve, what is reverse logistics?
Yeah, so I guess everyone's buying more online. And so because everyone's buying more online, then reverse logistics is naturally going to increase. And so that's essentially where it's the returning of that shipment back to the e-commerce store for whatever reason. Maybe the product was damaged, maybe you didn't like it, or maybe the size wasn't the right size for what you actually ordered. And so it's how do you get that product back to the customer and making it as simple as possible. And I think the companies that have really done this well have allowed customers to keep on that repeat purchasing, because if you're buying lots of things from a particular e-commerce store and the return process is really painful, it's less likely that you're going to continue to keep on purchasing from them. And I think reverse logistics is going to extend into the future. It could be that a customer might have the ability to open up the product and say, yes, this is the right size. Maybe they want to try it on and then say, no, it's the wrong size, and be able to return it. I think there's lots of things that the businesses are going to be able to do to really sort of make that reverse logistics experience a really, nice and easy to use experience. I think that the biggest challenge today is where you're having to book in for that courier to actually do that pickup. And can you make it as simple as possible? Can you book in a time window? And you don't want to have to go down to the local post office to drop it off, because that's just, a really painful process.
Yeah. And I mean, on the other end as well, I know that a lot of companies are also charging people to return some of these parcels. Could it be that there's maybe a profit to be made?
I think generally not. I think, maybe if you're wanting to add on that additional level of experience where the person has the ability to return it back to the driver and you can charge for that, and there's some additional money, that I think that makes sense. And some consumers may be willing to spend that because they don't want the hassle of having to go and call the courier or book it online or go down to the local post office. But I think, where you're probably going to make money from this is making it as easy as possible so that the customers will continue to repeat purchase. And everything in e-commerce, I think, is around repeat purchase. And the better your experience in booking and delivery, the more likely you're going to have repeat purchase.
But let's not simplify too much, because I understand it is quite complex,
Yeah.
especially if you operate across multiple channels, right? How complex can it get?
Oh, look, I think it definitely comes down to making sure you got the right technology in place to allow you to be able to track every one of those movements. And so, for drivers delivering it and it's going to be returned, how do you know it's going to be returned? Have you got the processes in place to be able to capture that return, to be able to bill the customer or to bill the supplier that's sending that product? So you do need the technology infrastructure in place and be able to do all the route optimization along those lines as well.
Yeah. Let's now look at something very interesting in the tech space. Apple's newly unveiled iPhone 15 Pro Max. And it's experiencing a little bit of delivery delays due to the significant demand for the company's latest flagship. Now, surprise, surprise. I mean, it's something that we've been reporting on for so many years. Queues and queues outside of stores. You would almost imagine that by now Apple would anticipate this huge demand. It went on pre-order a week ago, but its expected delivery date was then pushed back to mid-November in the US as soon as it opened. Now, how can they get it so wrong, Steve? Surely they should know by now and just make sure that they can actually deliver as they expect, everybody is expecting. Or is this actually a marketing strategy?
I really wonder whether this is a marketing strategy. I definitely think there's a large possibility that it is. I mean, I guess you're creating that FOMO effect, the fear of missing out, and people having to rush to get that order, so they're going to get the phone the first. There's some real people that really love Apple products, and they always want to have the latest gadget that actually comes out, and so that does create the demand. And I think when there's always, the sense of not being able to get what you actually want, then more people are going to continue to order. So I think this is definitely a marketing strategy. I mean, maybe there are some actual logistical delays, but it's probably going to be on the production side of things rather than actually, not having vehicles or, aircraft to be able to transfer product across the world. I think it's probably more likely a bit of a marketing. Maybe there is some product delays. Maybe they've had something in the production line that's actually slowed them down. But yeah, it's very interesting.
Let's say product delays. I mean, how can Apple then manage the delivery better to make sure that when there is a demand, they can feed into it directly?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's an interesting question. It's complicated in it's a lot around their manufacturing process. And I mean, Apple is experts at this stuff. They've had a lot of experience. They have, the best people in the world working inside of their business to making sure that they deliver on time, which is why I sort of think this is more a marketing strategy rather than a production issue, because they've got some really smart people inside of their business. So I think it'd be interesting to see what comes out in the future as to saying, was this marketing or was this actually a production issue? I'm sure we'll find out.
Yeah. Now, I mean, that accurate estimated delivery date is so vital. Now, that's the fourth story that I want to talk to you about. It's sharing that accurate estimated delivery date. It is such a valuable thing to do, and often it's actually overlooked in the e-commerce delivery space. It's not very simple to do. It's a bit tricky sometimes, but if you get it right, you can really improve your customer base significantly. It's just about building and boosting that confidence in your sales. But why is this so important to capitalize on this, estimated delivery date?
Yeah, I mean, I think as the person who's actually going through that checkout process, if you're able to tell them when that product's actually going to arrive, that's hugely valuable. They can then plan. They know that it's going to arrive at this point in time. But it is complicated for e-commerce stores to do that. We've got a product called Local Delivery that sits on the Shopify App Store. And what it allows businesses to be able to do is say, hey, this is where my store is. This is the area that I'm actually delivering in. And this is the time windows that are actually available throughout any day of the week as to when customers can actually have product delivered. And so this allows them to give those customers the flexibility to say, choose the day, and we'll show you the time windows that are available based on your area. What we often see is people that are running their own fleet of their own drivers can do this really easily because they can control the logistics infrastructure themselves. They can control what their drivers are doing. They can control the number of deliveries on a daily inside of those time windows. And so, yeah, they can give that customer experience. Where someone's actually using a third-party courier, then it makes it a bit more complicated, depending on how sophisticated that third-party courier actually is. If they're operating on a same-day basis, then yes, it's going to be available. You're going to still need to be able to do some integration into your e-commerce engine. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's so important to give that customer that ETA. And I think, in years ahead, everyone's going to be shifting towards that. It's not going to be you're going to order and it's going to be there in 5 to 7 days. It's going to be there and it's going to be there in this time window. And I think that's going to be really important.
Yeah. Would you say in the day and age that we're in with transparency and customers really want to know exactly when the parcel is arriving, it is so important for this last mile delivery process. Do you think that businesses who actually don't have that money, is it one of those things that they really have to invest in to make sure that this part of the last mile delivery is so transparent and that will actually increase their customer base?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, it's not expensive to do this. Any business can be doing this. It's just around actually saying, if you're the CEO or the owner of this business, say, hey, we want to do this and we want to invest the time and resources to make sure this actually takes place. There's lots of tools that you can use to do that. Our local delivery product is one of those, but using Locate to You is also another tool that allows you to do that as well. And that's because you're pulling that information into a system. These are the time windows that the orders are going to be delivered in. Then you're using route optimization to say, hey, let's deliver them inside of this time window. And that will later then say, you need X number of drivers. This is the order that they actually have to travel to actually get those deliveries to be completed inside of that time period. So yeah, I think it's more business owners knowing that this is actually something that customers want, and then knowing, okay, this is how you actually go and do that. And I think we should set up a separate segment and we can actually walk people through on how best to set that up inside of their business.
Yeah, absolutely. So the last one that I want to touch on is the Delivery Hero, and it's now actually in discussions, hoping to sell a portion of it to an Asia business at a reported value of over 1 billion euros. Now, Reuters is reporting that Singapore's Grab is actually open to being a potential buyer. Now, investors in the online takeaway food company welcomed this report. Its shares then increased by as much as 13.5%. Why is this? What can we read into this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, we've gone through, in terms of the capital markets, different stages. We've been in this period previously where there was a huge boom, a lot of online businesses, and the valuations were increasing dramatically. We've now gone into a market where there's, potential talks of recession. Markets have actually dropped and valuations of a lot of these online businesses have dropped dramatically. And so what's now happening is that businesses are looking at ways to get profitable and also the most efficient uses of their capital. And where they can consolidate, they're going to look to do that. So Delivery Hero's business is mostly in Europe. That's probably where their biggest market is. Their smaller market is probably in Asia. I'm guessing these things. I'm not 100% sure, but that's what I'm guessing. And they've probably got a really big and dominant competitor there, and that's Grab. Grab is the largest there. They were competing, in the ride-sharing space with Uber, and Uber actually merged in with their business. And Uber now owns, I think it's last was saying it was about 27% of Grab. It's through that merger that actually happened. And so I think what you're seeing now is this is now going to happen in the food space. Delivery Hero may merge in with Grab, and that will give them the same benefit that they had when they merged in with Uber. So investors are liking this story. It's going to reduce the overall cost base of Delivery Hero. They may be losing the money in that market, so that's going to mean we're going to reduce that. We're going to get paid some cash, which probably result in maybe a dividend that's going to be returned back to their investors. So yeah, it's a smart move. It'll be interesting to see whether it actually takes place. It's interesting that it's been leaked. Most of the time when deals like this are happening, it's all kept very, very secret until a deal is actually signed. And so it's interesting that it has been leaked. And I'm not so sure that Delivery Hero would be happy that it has been leaked as well.
Yeah. So one of the reasons here is the decline in food deliveries since the lockdown were lifted after COVID-19 pandemic, and more people are actually not ordering in, or that is what the statistics say. And could this actually, what's been happening here to Delivery Hero, could this be happening to other food delivery companies in the coming months or years?
Oh, look, I think, during COVID, we were living through a spike in demand across logistics, and that spike was not sustainable. A lot of people were sitting at home, they needed things delivered. People have gone back to the office. Not in all instances they've gone back. People weren't comfortable going outside. Everyone's now returning to a state of normality, going to the shops. And so I think what you will continue to see is this will gradually start to increase. I think the younger generation does use these online platforms a lot more. As that younger generation gets older, and you'll see growth in all of these markets. So I think it's going to continue to grow, but there was really a blip that happened during the COVID period.
Yeah. Well, that's a wrap from us at the e-commerce report. Thank you so much, Steve. Any last words from your side?
No, look, it was lots of good stories this week, and look forward to bringing the next round of stories next week on Friday.
Yes, thank you so much. So join us again next week, same time, same place. Goodbye for now.
Thanks, Mia.